right now, let me introduce another friend and neighbor, Mr. Richard Benbow, who retired from a distinguished career in executive management at the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Los Angeles, and was also general manager of the Community Development Department, later EWDD, which is the same agency Ms. Perry ran. So we got two former general managers here. Mr. Benbow's signature and imprint authorized hundreds of millions of dollars used by CRA, LA, and EWDD to build thousands of units of affordable housing, create newly revitalized commercial space, and fund the creation of jobs, and help small businesses access capital. Mr. Benbow is going to spend a few minutes with us to describe the right path that we need to follow to get more affordable housing in place for our communities. Richard, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, John, and thank you to all who are gathered here for this forum. As you know, this is really important business. And for those of us who have fought this battle on the front lines for so many decades, this is just the latest challenge to our ability to manage our communities and to provide residents with the housing, the infrastructure, the economic opportunities that we so sorely need to be successful. I won't repeat a lot of things that have already been said, although they're inherent in my remarks. So I will try to skip past the things that we've heard over and over again. But there are certain concepts, I think, that we need to continue to reiterate because they drive the conversation that we're having about why these bills don't work for us. The proposed legislation coming out of Sacramento proposes several problems for those of us at the grassroots level who have been fighting the affordable housing and community development battle for decades. This legislation is contrary to the lessons that we've learned from previous experience. The legislation ignores the role of the Housing and Community Development Department of the state and our regional Southern California Association of Governments in collaborative planning and the establishment of benchmarks for performance. It provides new incentives for real estate investors and speculators to build even higher proportions of market rate housing while creating undesirable levels of density in single family home communities, while giving away incentives otherwise reserved for affordable housing, despite reliable data that demonstrates the need for incentives to build affordable housing. And despite the fact that construction of market rate housing has kept pace with the need. The legislation abandons the more successful strategies employed prior to the recession and the dismantling of redevelopment agencies in 2012, which, by the way, provided 80% of the state funding for affordable housing through the redeployment of local property taxes, as Ms. Perry pointed out so quite eloquently before I spoke. It's sort of like killing the goose that laid the golden egg. That's what happened when redevelopment agencies were dissolved. The innovative economic incentive for cities to repurpose idle big box retail for workforce housing could work to benefit moderate income housing and new commercial space for emerging small businesses if used properly, but it cannot be done successfully in a vacuum. As a former redevelopment executive, I am keenly aware of the impact of the dissolution of RDAs. Losing 80% of the funding available to the production of affordable housing is just the tip of the iceberg as it relates to the required infrastructure that's necessary for building an affordable housing program, not just affordable housing units, but an affordable housing program that is collaborative, sustainable, and ultimately more effective. Here's an overview of the CRA's contributions to collaborative, sustainable, and effective affordable housing models. So when we talk about where we go from here, we can start with these benchmarks, which are obviously not included in the proposed legislation. In terms of collaboration, In order to implement new legislation that seriously impacts one of the most important aspects of our lives, our housing, and particularly in LA, where the cost of housing is so high and consumes a large portion of our income, there has to be collaboration. State, county, and local governments should be in sync on long-term goals and strategies. In addition, each community or neighborhood needs to have a choice on how to change the character, which includes the economics of living where they live now. Someone said earlier, we chose to live here for a reason, and we chose to continue to live here for those same reasons. In the CRA, the answer to that was a mandate to maintain strong working relationships with elected officials, city departments like the planning, housing, public works, parks and recreation, building and safety, LAPD, LAFD, EWD, and others. We also work with neighborhood councils and the residents' project area committees, which CRA formed for every project area, that work with staff to develop a unique, comprehensive plan and guidelines for future development of their community. City leaders also relied on the CRA to carry out large and complicated developments like LA Live, Hollywood Highland, Crenshaw Baldwin Hills Mall, the Watt Shopping Center, and others. A great portion of the affordable housing projects were accomplished by community-based nonprofits working side by side with experienced redevelopment professionals and developers. The nonprofit organizations and project area committees benefited tremendously through this process and delivered quality products, almost all of which are still in operation. Products of the kind of the collaboration I'm speaking of include the SRO Corporation, the Skid Row Housing Trust Fund, and establishment of a Central City East project area. All of these were initiatives that were formed through the collaboration of local residents and government, seeing a problem, understanding it, and coming up with a solution that everybody was in agreement with. Community plans and the required technical studies to produce quality projects were also products of a collaborative effort. The proposed legislation says nothing about collaboration. Instead, it seems to bypass all branches of government and citizens who have traditionally had a role in planning communities and building affordable housing in favor of rewarding developers by right privileges with increased densities and no meaningful incentives, which we know by experience is needed to build affordable housing. Sustainability. CRA had no money printing press, but it did have a share of tax increment revenues generated from the incremental increase in the value of the properties in the specific project areas. Redevelopment law restricts the expenditure increment to the project area that produces it and only for certain expenses. It is true that low-income areas produce little tax increment, but that did not mean they lost out on obtaining funds for affordable housing. A very clever policy change in setting up a citywide affordable housing project area and allowing more resourceful projects to contribute funds into an affordable housing trust fund, low-income areas were able to access funds necessary to assist in financing affordable housing. As they say, the only thing that we can be sure of is death and taxes, and that our taxes usually go up, allowing the communities that produced it to enjoy the benefits of reinvestment. I don't think we can effectively argue that affordable housing can be built without subsidies. The real question is how to deliver them and how much do we need? Having a real estate tax-based funding mechanism seemed to work well until the recession, when the state decided to dissolve RDAs and redirect those funds for other state priorities. Tax revenues have almost doubled since then, while the state has drastically reduced its contribution to the development of affordable housing. The more recent propositions which produce which produced what seemed like a huge amount of money for affordable housing, has all been allocated. But a small percentage of the housing it was supposed to produce is actually online now. So now what do we do? Mount another campaign for another huge bond measure, then another, and another. At some point, taxpayers will say no. There were some questionable uses of tax increment funds by some RDAs, but overall, I think we can say it was the most effective tool we had to help finance affordable housing in Los Angeles. However, the decision was made to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Effectiveness. Effectiveness is determined by measuring results against established goals. Under the CRA model, thousands of affordable housing units were built, working mostly with nonprofits throughout the city. Each project area plan had a goal for affordable housing and even identified areas where the housing could be built, and a budget. Annual reports on goal attainment, project expenditures, new initiatives, and plan amendments were issued and reviewed by all stakeholders as part of the approval process. The basic question of what did we do, how did we do it, what did it cost, and how can we do better? So I return to what I said were the 3 pillars of where we should go. It involves collaboration, sustainability, and effectiveness. Thank you.